Hello, and welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast, brought to you by the Malfers Group team, where each week we tackle important, actionable topics to help churches thrive. And now, here's your hosts, Scott Ball and AJ Matthew.
Welcome to episode 21 of the Church Revitalization Podcast. This week's episode is brought to you by Church Revitalization University, an affordable online course that empowers leaders like you to navigate your own church through the Malfers Group's revitalization process. The course leverages a blend of video training hosted by our revitalization experts and actionable workshops that are led by you. Don't worry, we will teach you everything you need to know on how to run the workshops so you will not get confused. And more importantly, your church is finally going to start making decisions and not just having discussions. Registration for the full course opens on January 15th, but you can watch a sample video and download the free ebook, Preparing Your Church for Revitalization, by visiting churchrevitalizationuniversity.com. Now, in this week's episode, AJ and I share the three most common mistakes that churches make in the revitalization process. While every church and every situation really is unique, the pitfalls in revitalization are common. And in this episode, we'll share the three most common mistakes and what you can do to avoid them. To read today's show notes and to share this list of common mistakes, please visit malfersgroup.com/21, malfersgroup.com/21. Now, let's dive in.
Okay, thanks for joining us this week on the Church Revitalization Podcast. This week in episode 21, we're talking the three most common revitalization mistakes.
Yeah, we've seen a few of them.
Yeah, we could have more than three, believe us, but
Yeah.
we've narrowed it down for you, the listening pastor.
Yeah, listen, I know you, pastor. You like to just scroll through. It's 3 bullet points. That's really fast. We wanted to keep it simple, but I encourage you to really listen to these and the nuance of these things, because the issues are, they're pretty complex, and there's reasons why they're so common. So hopefully you'll stay tuned in and listen to all three and why they are so common and how you can avoid them. Point number one that you have, or common mistake number one that you have here, is not having the leadership support before you begin the process. Talk about why is that so important to have that, and what happens if you don't.
Yeah, so it's important because you've got to have your leadership team on the same page. Now, unfortunately, it's a tough question sometimes when we ask churches, and sometimes, in like a very first session that we're working with, I frequently ask the question, who's in charge here? And it's amazing how the people in the room who are supposed to be really the ministry leaders of the church are just looking around, Sometimes they point at the pastor. Sometimes they're actually honest enough to not point at the pastor, because a lot of churches know he's actually not in charge.
Sometimes they'll laugh.
Yeah. Oh, frequently laugh. That uncomfortable laugh.
Yeah, like we don't know what to say, so we'll just laugh instead.
Yeah. But this is sad as it actually is, really. Many churches don't have really clear authority structure in the church. And so for you, the pastor or leader that's listening to this, knowing who really needs to get on board first can be a challenge. You might be able to peruse the bylaws or constitution and see maybe what the design was, but many times practice is different than what has been written. And so you really have to think through this. And in some cases, really, who's in charge is the congregation. And that's the case in a lot of churches. But you've got to be able to work through this and really understand it. So kind of reel this back now. If you're the pastor or, maybe an elder or somebody, church board member listening to this, you really have to understand who the leadership is in the church and begin talking about revitalization so that the leadership team is all speaking the same language and is headed in the same direction together. You've got to be able to prepare that way so that you can speak to the whole church and be unified.
Yeah, so it's really important to have that red tape cleared. So, we've given this example before of a church I'm aware of that did their own DIY, do-it-yourself revitalization process for 2 years. and then came up with some recommendations, and the church got angry and almost nearly split over it. And the church has, from this point on, they called us to see if we could help them, and the church ultimately rejected us helping them because they didn't want to do anything else. They were just so emotionally worn out. Um, at any rate, it was not a good situation, and the root cause of that problem was they had they didn't get they didn't approve the scope of work through whatever leadership system they had. So people need to understand, here are the kinds of things we're going to be working on. Here are the kinds of things we're not going to be working on. Here are the kinds of decisions we're going to make. Here are the kinds of decisions we're not going to make.
Hmm.
And let everyone, generally, if you've got some clarity on the front end, you're saving yourself some trouble on the back end.
Yeah, absolutely. So you not only do you need to gain the proper support from the beginning, you need that leadership then to continue to support the process as you're going along.
That's
So
right.
yeah,
And
so
if you're
that's
clear, it helps, because it's support for what exactly. Just
right.
revitalization is too broad of a term. You really need to clarify what exactly you're wanting to accomplish in that process.
Absolutely. But the success or failure of any revitalization process always comes back to the leadership of the church. And so if it's clear, if it's communicated well, if you're unified together, you have a much higher chance of success than if you're not clear up front on who's leading and who's gonna participate in the decision making process.
Absolutely. All right. So mistake number 2 is not communicating well with the congregation throughout the process. So, oh man, we see this one a lot, and it causes all kinds of trouble. So, what happens when we don't communicate well?
Yeah. People don't like being in the dark on things.
Yeah.
And that's a human thing in just all aspects of life. I mean, people are always better. A lot of people, some people like surprises. Nobody likes bad surprises. But the more information you can provide somebody, the better they can process it however they process information. You've got to be able to communicate clearly so that they have that opportunity to process the information in the way that works best for them, be able to ask questions. This starts at the beginning. You don't want to just spring, all of a sudden you're saying, hey, we're starting revitalization. This has got to be talked about, as soon as it, is appropriate to start talking about where we're trying to go as a church. The word vision begins to come up immediately because we're not talking about negative things. We're talking about how are we going to move into a greater future that God has planned for our church. That's
Mhm.
what we're communicating. And so beginning that process, making it exciting, making it anticipatory, and making it sound like something that people would want to be a part of is really going to help. But you've got to continue to do this throughout the process. We've got to be communicating across all the mediums that are necessary for the demographic of our church, and make sure that we're unified in our message, that it's very clear. People have opportunities to ask questions, and that's what's going to ultimately help continue moving this forward. That's what's going to allow this to perpetuate forward and not be hitting roadblocks along the way.
Yeah. So, there are 2 recommendations that we make to churches that help with this process quite a bit. The first one is clearly communicate when your sort of work sessions are going to be when you're going through a revitalization process, and make sure that those are open sessions. Not open in the sense that everyone gets to participate, but open in the sense that everybody could attend. Sort of like a session of Congress. Like, you go and you sit in the gallery, you don't get to vote, but you do get to listen in and hear how the conversation went. And you want that. We often even encourage churches to set up a little camcorder in the corner, or set up a little tape recorder in the middle of the room to catch the whole session and record that. And then make that available to anybody who wants to watch it if they can't be there in person. I don't know that anybody would ever want to sit and watch, 7 hours of your work session if you're going through church revitalization or working with us and using, our the way that we structure work sessions. It would be 7 hours between 2 days. But that they could go back and watch it gives people, it's like a warm blanket for people, AJ, to know
Yeah.
It wasn't a secret. There was no secret meeting. There was no cabal. There was no, like, none of that was happening. If I wanted to hear what was going on, I was welcome to attend, and I can, even if I couldn't come, I can go back and listen or watch. That makes people feel better. The second thing that we do, AJ, is we encourage non sort of pastoral and board leadership to make announcements about progress.
Yeah.
So why do we say that that's so important, AJ? Explain to folks why it's really important for people to hear from Sally and not just, Pastor Sam.
Yeah, well, we know we can count on Pastor Sam being positive about whatever is going on. Sally, though, if Sally gets up on the Sunday morning and is like, "Hey, church, I just want to tell you about that work session, our revitalization work session this week. Something that really touched my heart was whenever we started talking about our mission, it really came to life for me. What we're after as a church. And when people are hearing from Sally and they're like, wow, Sally was really impacted by this.
Yeah.
That's going to make a difference. It just resonates to see Sally is one of us, and Sally really sees the value in this now and is excited about it. That is a much different result in that message than it would be coming from Pastor Sam.
Absolutely. So communicating throughout the process, just means keeping people informed so they're not surprised. I think I told you off air, AJ, my pastor, he had a great quote this past Sunday. And I just loved it, and I'm totally stealing it. He said, people like change. Everybody likes change. And then he paused and he said, change that they came up with. That was their idea.
Yeah.
Everybody loves change when it's their idea. But when it's not their idea, people don't like it. And so it's important for people to have ownership of that change. Maybe if it wasn't their idea, having someone like Sally, for example, or having their ability to have sat in the room while the decision was being made, at least gives them opportunities where, like, Sally is one of us. She's like me, or I could sit in the room and I could hear the process going on. You at least feel like you're more part of the process. And the more you
Yeah.
engage people, make them feel like the change that's being made is their change, the more likely they are to adapt well with those changes.
Yeah. We've seen churches do even a lobby booth during the process, with some members of the leadership team there. And, before or after worship service on Sunday, come over there and chat about it. Hey, what was going on this weekend? What'd y'all talk about? So there's lots of ways. Those are just a couple examples, but those are good ones. But having people be able to get their questions answered and hear from folks other than the standard leadership talking heads is a good idea.
All right. Number 3. This is the crowning common mistake.
Yeah.
This is the big kahuna. This is the Kraken. This is the Achilles heel. How else can I put it, AJ? This is the big one.
You've got them on the edge of their seats.
It's not implementing changes.
Oh, boy.
Not implementing changes. This takes 2 forms. So kind of explain the 2 ways that a lack of implementation can manifest itself.
Yeah. So, well, this really is everything. Revitalization of a church, by definition, means something has changed. A church doing the same thing this Sunday as it did last Sunday is not a church in a revitalization process. That's a church just kind of doing its thing. So let's make sure we're all clear. Something has to change if you want to change, right?
Right. No doubt. Right, I know we're saying that like, duh.
Yeah.
But sometimes churches think just doing the work sessions is the revitalization. It's like,
it is not.
You actually have to do the things you decided.
Yeah. Technically, your entire process is only preparing for revitalization until you said, okay, we have our plan and now we're executing it.
And that's not to understate the work that's done, because it is often groundbreaking.
Absolutely.
And it is hard and it is taxing and emotional. But there's still, it's just the beginning.
Right. Yeah. So, okay. So we break down not implementing change into kind of two different similar things, but distinct. First, that's making plans that you don't follow through with. So you've met, you've discussed, you had great ideas, and then you just never really end up doing anything. And this is one of those cases in which past performance might be an indicator of future performance. Unlike your mutual fund prospectus that they tell you, hey, just because it did well previously doesn't mean it's still going to do well. Or in this case, a lot of times, because it has done poorly previously, might continue to do poorly. So if you've made plans in the past and not followed through with them, then that is likely to happen again. So you really do need to make sure that you are prepared. That's a leadership change that has to happen. That has to happen as a team decision, that it's named and say, we just can't let that happen. If you're known, you may be known for that among the congregation even.
Right.
We've heard good ideas before. We've heard leaders get up and talk about great ideas, and we never saw it happen. You cannot let that happen now, because a lot of leadership capital is spent getting the church prepared and on track for a revitalization process. And if you do not follow through with that, it's going to be a while before that account fills back up enough for you to have another go at it.
Absolutely.
There's a lot at stake here. And so you've got to make sure that you're ready to get started and follow through, because it's terribly damaging if you don't. In addition to just simply the loss of the kingdom benefit that you were going to have had you followed through with it.
Think about this. If you were to go through our process through Church Revitalization University or work with us one-on-one, the Church Revitalization University cost is pretty low. But working with us one-on-one is obviously a little bit more expensive. But it's not just the financial resources. If you go through a process like ours and you're asking for 3 or 4 weekends from folks, 7 hours for each of those weekends, how much time they've invested in it.
Yeah.
And then for you not to follow through is a massive breach of trust. Because if you're going through it the way that we do it, we're asking for a covenant of commitment from those folks. They showed up, they came, they're ready to come to the implementation team meetings, they're willing to do the work. And then for you not to follow through on those commitments, I mean, it's obviously there's a kingdom issue at hand and there's a leadership issue at hand, but it's also a character issue, AJ.
Yeah. It is.
It's our reputation and character and trustworthiness to follow through on our commitments. And so it's really important, but the vast majority of churches who undergo a revitalization process, thankfully, I wouldn't say a vast majority of the churches we work with, but some, but definitely a vast majority of churches in general that try to go through this kind of a work, it falters somewhere in the implementation phase because of a lack of commitment.
Mm-hmm. And probably
to ever starting in the first place, to ever implementing the changes in the first place, which was number one, right?
Yeah, you're right. The second one, I don't know, maybe we see more often though. The second one is backsliding into old ways once you've completed sort of the planning process of revitalization and you're in the implementation phase and you sort of get some things started. But guess what? Things are going to change, and now all of a sudden, either leaders or just congregation members are pushing back.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of this can be avoided by point number 2, communicating well with the congregation. But if you reach this point where you're starting to get the pushback, and all of a sudden Egypt starts, looking like the preferred location instead of being out here in the wilderness headed towards something better, you've got to have the leadership fortitude to work through that. Because if you get part the way into it, and what probably in most cases is a relatively small but vocal group of detractors, if you allow them to really push enough where you say, okay, we're not changing, then you're probably worse than you were before you even started at that point.
Yeah.
Because you're likely not going to get another chance to make those changes then.
No, you're not. One of the examples we'll occasionally use, AJ, is this idea of seeds. Like when you start something new, it's like a seed. And if you're expecting, when you implement a change, when you plant a change, if you are expecting to see just growth or abundance or anything at first, you are mistaken. You plant seeds. My mother-in-law has a green thumb. She's really good out in the garden, and I'm not at all. But I know last week here in December, she was planting her bulbs, the tulips. She's not expecting to see those tulips until springtime, because that's how bulbs work, right? But lots of times pastors, man, AJ, they plant a seed and they're expecting that the fruit of that change to happen immediately. It's going to take 9 months, 12 months, 18 months. And if you bail on the change before it has a chance to germinate and sprout up and be fruitful, you don't get to go back. Like if you've already thrown out the seed. And it's I think that's the worst form of,
Yeah.
if you never planted the seed to begin with, maybe there's a chance that you can still plant the seed. But if you plant the seed and then throw it out because you didn't get the results you were expecting in 10 minutes, it's over. It's
Yeah.
game over.
Yeah.
And that's devastating.
Yeah, it definitely is. Hate to see it. Breaks my heart. And we see it sometimes. Not every
We see it
church
occasionally. Yeah.
charges forward with a successful revitalization process. But avoiding these three things that we've talked about today puts
Yeah.
you in like the 99th percentile. You're going to do well implementing positive change in your church.
Yeah, it's so cool. Churches will say, I get this question a lot. Can you give us a percentage? What percentage of people, or give me some statistics on how well your process works, in helping churches to turn around or grow or revitalize or fill in the blank with the term. And my response to that is always the same. I can't guarantee. The reason I can't give you a number is because I can't guarantee your effort. It's the
Yeah,
one thing that I cannot guarantee. 100% of the churches that commit to the process and follow through see positive change.
that's right.
That's a fact. There's not a single church we've worked with ever that committed to the process and committed to implementation that did not see positive change and healthy, sustainable growth. They do. But churches that bail don't see it.
That's
And
right.
I can't guarantee that. I can't control that. You still have to make that choice.
Yeah. If you're hinging a revitalization process on an outside resource to give you a guarantee of success, you are not ready for a revitalization process because
Right.
you're putting it on somebody outside of yourself and you're the one that's going to make it happen.
Why an outside resource is good is it can give you the tools, information, and process and structure that maybe you don't have internally, and it can give you some accountability.
Exactly.
It can bring you all the way up to the door, but you still have to walk through it. And
Yes.
so that's actually a really good segue, AJ, to announcing. We've been teasing this for a couple of weeks, but Church Revitalization University registration opens up
Yeah. In 2
um,
weeks
January
or next
15th.
week. Yeah.
Whenever, don't depends on when you're listening to this, but it opens up on January 15th
2020.
and 2020. Yeah. And I don't know, we've never announced this on the podcast, AJ, but the price of it is just $4.99. So we have made this, talk about trying to make it as easy as possible for your church to have a process for revitalization, a structure for revitalization, accountability for revitalization, all of that, all the tools you need, all the workshops that you need, all of that for $4.99 is right there. The only thing we cannot do for you is make decisions.
Yeah.
You have to do that. You have to commit. You have to do that. But if you want a partner to help you and you can't afford to work with us or some other group one-on-one, it's just unattainable financially, or you just know your team would never agree to it, we have priced this for you.
Yeah.
We're not doing this to make money. We've priced this at, what we feel like is that minimal investment, so you're committed to the process,
Mhm.
but it's $4.99, so hopefully you don't have to get, finance team approval or get a congregational vote on it. We want to make it really easy for you to be able to get this. And so
Yeah.
registration opens January 15th, but you can go right now to churchrevitalizationuniversity.com and sign up, see a sample video. It's not a whole lesson, but you can see a sample video right now, and maybe some other resources. We might be adding some free extra resources for folks right now, just to get a sense of what all it's going to cover. And then you'll get an email the second that registration opens up and be ready for that.
Yeah, we're super excited about this for you guys. The Malphurs Group is a not-for-profit ministry, and our vision is to be able to make all of what we do attainable for any church, regardless of size. And so this is just another one of the tools, a resource that we've been working really hard on for quite a long time. We're excited about launching it. And the minimal investment on your end, sows back into our ministry to continue to make resources like this available to churches that need them worldwide. So we really are thrilled about this, and it's been a long time coming. A lot of work has gone into it, and we think it's going to be really helpful for your church and hopefully lots and lots of other ones as well.
Let's put a bow on this thing, and let me recap real fast the 3 most common revitalization mistakes that we see again and again and again. The first one is not having leadership support before the process. So either not clearing all the channels, and certainly maybe not giving that full scope of work to that leadership team to begin with, so that you just want to make sure no one feels surprised by the decisions that get made, as much as possible. Number 2 is not communicating well with the congregation throughout the process. So, what can happen is people said yes to the process, but then they don't hear anything for the 4 months that you're going through the meetings. And then people just start filling in the blanks and guessing. They hear little trickles of stuff that happened, and they get worried and scared and nervous. And then that can just sort of derail your whole process. So you want to be sure you're communicating well throughout the whole time that you are doing your sessions, and then obviously continuing into implementation, communicating well there. And then finally, not implementing changes, either never implementing them to begin with, or bailing on changes, if you don't see growth right away or change right away. That's obviously the most devastating. Both are bad. That's the worst. And if you can avoid those common mistakes, you're going to be much better off. Next week, AJ, excited about episode 22.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're talking the 3 ways to know that you're ready to lead your church through revitalization. It's almost like a sister episode to this one, but it's about you as the pastor, or maybe you're an associate pastor, a youth pastor, or a board member. But how do you know that you, as a church leader, you're ready to lead your church through revitalization? And I think you're going to love that episode.
Yeah. You can read today's show notes, read the article at malphursgroup.com/21, just the number 21. And we'll be looking forward to having you back next week on another episode of the Church Revitalization Podcast. Praying blessings over you and your ministry until then. Thanks, friends.